What's good? My name is Lil D, and today's finally the day we're talking about camera technicals, and to be more specific, the camera sensor. If you ever heard of megapixels, crop factor, picture bitness, or even chroma sampling but never could really get what this all means, then you're exactly where you have to be. Today I'm gonna quickly take you through the basic stats of the camera sensor, the main element of your camera, allowing me to film stuff like this. Girl tag is in the description of However, firstly, let's talk about the crop factor, or to speak more simple, the size of the sensor. On the mass market, we have them mostly of three types: full frame, crop, and micro four thirds, also marked as crop factor 1, crop factor 1.6, and crop factor 2. Which means that the camera that I'm now filming this haul on, Canon EOS RP, is a full frame one, and this size is what everything is measured from. Then Canon 600D is a crop sized sensor camera, which means that its sensor is 1.6 times smaller than the full frame one. And micro four thirds camera like Panasonic GH5 or what I have at GF5 has a sensor that is 2 times smaller than the full frame one. First of all, what does it mean? Firstly, it means that a smaller sensor is going to receive a smaller information scale. So a micro four thirds sensor is going to be able to receive 2 times less information scale than a full frame, and crop sensor is able to receive 1.6 times less information. But that doesn't mean that smaller sensors are giving out worse quality. That just means that the image from them is going to be cropped times crop factor related to full frame. So for example, a Panasonic GF5 image is going to be zoomed in 2 times related to Canon EOS RP, and a Canon 600D footage is going to be zoomed in 1.6 times related to full frame footage. So this means that a 50mm lens on a full frame is going to be equal to a 25mm one on micro four thirds, or 30 to 31mm one on crop sensor. How does it affect the final footage? Well, there are a couple points of the answer for this again. Firstly, as you can see, the background is blurred more on shots with bigger sensors, like here. So point number 1 is going to be in different depth of field. It's just bigger on cameras with smaller sensors. Number 2 is that smaller sensors can give out a little bit more gray noise due to a smaller size of a single pixel. But if your camera with a smaller sensor has the ability of just combining a couple pixels into one, then this problem kind of goes to the background. Point number 3 is the amount of light getting on the sensor itself. As the full frame sensor is bigger, it can receive just a bigger amount of light in a certain period of time than a smaller sensor. So as we do it with the focal length, meaning multiplying it by the crop factor to get the real meaning of it, we should do it with the aperture meaning as well. An f2 lens for a crop camera is going to be equal to an f3.2, one for full frame, and f1.6 for a crop one, by just simple mathematical equations. This all means that you're going to have to own a 2 times bigger hull on your lens for micro four thirds camera to just have the same light power as you would have on a full frame sensor. However, I also gotta mention that smaller size sensors also have their own upsides. As you can see, if I switch to 4K mode on my Canon RD, it crops my footage to crop factor 1.8, so which is easier for the in-camera processor to work with the data flow going through it, taken from a cropped sensor area than from the entire full frame sensor. The point is that on Micro Four Thirds cameras, for example Panasonic GH5, the image doesn't crop even at 4K 60 frames per second because the processor still possesses enough strength to work with all the data flow going through it, partly because the sensor itself is super small. It's 2 times smaller than a full frame, so it's 2 times easier to work with the data flow going from it than with the data flow going from a big full frame sensor. So the cheat key here could be using full frame or crop lenses with Micro Four Thirds cameras, also using a speed booster between them, so you can get the light power of a cropped or full frame lens with the video abilities of Micro Four Thirds. And if you guys want me to tell you about speed boosters, then let me know in the comments. At the end of my talk about crop factor, I also got to mention that any type of a sensor has its own upsides and downsides. For example, I'm filming this entire video with a full frame camera, and the previous one was filmed with a cropped 600D, and you can get the most out of any type of the sensor. The main thing here is to just understand how this or that type works. So for example, with a full frame I can get a better depth of field and better background blur, better light power, etc, etc, etc. But with the Micro Four Thirds camera I will be able to get a better resolution of the video and a bigger quantity of frames per second, which could be also super useful for me filming B-rolls. But as you can see, even a B-roll film with a full frame camera is still super decent, and just you gotta work with what you got. That's the point here. So the second part of today's video is going to be me telling you about camera's resolution. And if you ever heard of megapixels in some kind of a conversation about cameras, then this is exactly what resolution is about. Megapixels stated on the camera's test is basically the quantity of light sensitive elements in its sensor. And if a camera possesses 26.2 megapixels like my camera does, then it means that the sensor itself possesses 26,200,000 pixels on it. And if you're a photographer, then while you're taking those pics, your camera is using 100% of them. But if you're filming a video like I'm doing now, then the sensor is using just the amount of pixels required for some kind of resolution. For example, if you're filming an HD quality video, then you're using 1280 times 720, 921,600 pixels. But if you're filming already a full HD quality video, then you're using 1920 times 1080, which is 2,073,600 pixels, which is, as you can see, more than 2 times more than in HD case. And this all doesn't mean that your camera is going to crop the image to just use some super limited area of your sensor to just fit those 2 million or 1 million of pixels in it. That just means that it is going to combine a couple pixels into one, for example 4:1, like again USRP does. A super loud plane there. So how does resolution affect your pictures? Well, it depends on what scale you're watching them on. For example, if you open 12 and 26 megapixels images on your phone screen, then you won't see any particular difference. But if you start scaling them on, then 12 megapixel picture is going to start crashing into separate pixels way earlier than 26 one, just because it has less pixels and that means less information on it. So what I can say here is that if you're mostly filming videos or taking pics for just social media, then you don't need any sort of a camera with a sky high amount of megapixels on it. But if you are a professional photographer printing them albums and like wall-wide banners, then of course you need something at least over 24 megapixels, so while scaling that image up you don't lose any quality and the picture just does not start crashing into separate pixels. Done with part number 2, moving on to part number 3, which is going to be picture's bitness, and this one is the easiest for me to explain to you today. The more bits, the more colors you can get from your camera, and the more space it all takes on your card. Well, just kidding. Let me explain this one to you properly. The number of bits in your camera is basically the amount of colors you're able to receive from it, equal to 2 to the power of bits. So if you have, for example, an 8-bit image, it means that it just has 256 different color shades on it, and if it's 10-bit, then you get 1024 different color shades, which is already way more. Modern cameras can also give out 12, 14, and even sometimes 16-bit images, but these are already like in another sphere, like professional filmmaking and cinematography and stuff. If you've ever seen any footage with a difficult gradient, like a sunset for example, and seen the gradient going broken, like going stab, like you see on your screen now, it's most likely to be just because the image is 8-bit and the camera just does not possess enough colors to fill all those stages of the dynamic range of the footage. If you're using a 10-bit or a 12-bit camera, then you're most likely not to face this problem. And here I gotta say that even an 8-bit camera is enough if you're filming for YouTube or Instagram or any other kind of social media platforms, just because you don't need that over-the-top quality here. But if you're filming something like commercial vids, advertisements, or even cinema, no matter if it's short mirror or long mirror, you better take a 12 to 16-bit camera, just not to lag that color information and not to miss on any gray footage just due to lack of picture's bitness. Getting more understandable here? I hope so. Picture's bitness as a color stat in your camera always goes hand in hand with another more difficult stat, chroma subsampling. Basically, it's a method of saving space in your storage, whether it's an SD card or any other hardware drive that you use to record videos and photos in it, as I sometimes do. Well, let's start here with the biggest, the wettiest, and the most professional option, 444. To explain this one to you, here I have this little table, and starting with the 444 one, let me explain to you firstly what all these three numbers mean. Let's start with the fact that every color that you see on the result picture on your camera has two types of information: the luma, which represents the luminance right here, and a chroma, which represents the hue and saturation kind of information of a single color. And what the 444 variation of chroma subsampling does is basically nothing, because it gives you out literally what you see. So the first four represents the amount of pixels having unique luminance information on each top and bottom row. Then, as you can see here, and in any other case, all 8 pixels are different on luma information. Next up, the second number represents the amount of pixels having unique chroma information on the top row. And here, as you can see, all 4 are different, so the second number goes 4 again. And then the third number represents the amount of pixels having unique chroma information, but this time on the bottom row. And in this case, again, all 4 are different, so third number is also going to be 4, and in result, we get literally what the camera gets from its sensor giving us out. Next up, the 422 case, a little bit more widespread, and it's used mostly on modern companies flagmans such as Sony A7 and A7S series. Canon 90D, as far as I remember, has this one, and new Canon mirrorless cameras such as R5 and R6 also have this type of chroma subsampling. And here again, we can see all 8, so 4 on each row, pixels having unique lumen information, so the first number is 4. Then on chroma row, we see that on the top row, we see only 2 pixels having unique colors, and the other 2 just copying their information. So here we get not a 4 like the previous time, but a 2. And then looking at the bottom row, we see the exact same situation as with the top row. So 2 pixels have unique chroma information, and the other 2 are just them being copied. And in the result, we get still a great variation of chroma subsampling, giving out as super cinematic shots if we're not watching them on a super huge cinema screen, but already taking 2 times less space on your memory disk due to the amount of colors on the video being 2 times smaller. And the last but the most widespread and economical one, the 4201. And here I gotta say that literally 90% of all the cameras being released on the mass market on only the desktop Chrome subsampling, and mine RP is on exclusion. It has a maximum of 420 10-bit colors. Here, as we can see, the same exact situation with the Luma information as we saw in the 2 previous ones, but with Chroma one, we see 2 pixels in the top row being of unique Chroma information again, but their information is being not only copied on their row, but also to the bottom row. So only the 2 pixels on the top row have unique Chroma information, and the other 6 are just being their copies. So on the bottom row we don't have a single unique pixel. So here we have a 420. The picture having the less colors compared to the other options of this Chrome subsampling, but still saving us up to 4 times space on our drive just because it has 4 times less colors on it. And yes guys, ending the video so sharply, just because this is not the very end of this technical series. There are going to be 3 videos of this one. They're going to be getting released in a span of 2 months till the end of June, and the next video is going to be about camera processor, and the one after it is going to be about exposuring your image right. So for today's video, this is pretty much all I had and all I wanted to tell you. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button if you liked the video, hit the dislike if you didn't. Stay tuned for the next videos coming this week. Goodbye.